So, hi, and welcome to the next episode of the podcast Deep Talks. Today, with my amazing guest, Pearl Lim. Hi, Pearl.
Hey, Pira. Thanks for having me.
Last time when we met, we discussed a lot of things in person. We spent 3 hours together, but we didn't record it. And
I
I was
know.
so sad. So now we have a chance to make it even better. So tell me, what is your definition of a good leadership?
That is the question on everyone's minds, isn't it? All of us have to work, and all of us work for some kind of leader, one way or another. And I think, if you do an exercise and you ask people what good leadership looks like, and you see the words they put up on a board, it's always going to be someone who is clear, who is someone who gives you clarity, someone who listens. Empathetic comes up on the list. Authenticity comes up. You're never going to get someone who's like directive, micromanaging, gives me instructions.
Okay.
and I think that's very telling. So good leadership to me is someone who actually have the traits of a curious leader. Someone who constantly wants to learn about the business, how they can serve their customers better and serve their team better.
Wow. But then if you ask how many % of leaders that those people had in their life were with those personal traits, what do you think? Like how many % of leaders are that good leaders?
It is a very small percentage,
Right, yeah.
I think you are right. And I think a big part of that is also because there is a certain baggage that we come with traditional leadership models.
The directive one.
The directive way.
Yeah.
And I think, in the early generations, where productivity and economical, profits are like key or matter more to, each country and each market and each company, like those things are prioritized more. As countries and economies develop, and I think people develop as well, the culture has shifted so that it's no longer about just being productive, hitting low costs. These days...
Delivering just results, right?
Delivering just results. And these days, if you look at, social media or internet and you see what people are looking for, meaning and purpose comes out a lot.
And do you see any transition even here in Singapore in terms of leadership? Are there some new leaders with this new mindset?
Oh, yes. And, I think they come in different profiles. Like, I wish I can say that, yes, there is that profile. If you work for this multinational company, with a team under you, like, you're going to be a curious leader. And they come in all sorts of forms and shapes. And the curious leader actually would be that entrepreneur, actually, who is curious about how to make products and services better for people. And also, there are leaders who are CEOs of multinational companies who exemplify that in the way they talk about people as well. So I'm going to give you an example. Recently I hosted a Curious Leaders Circle event, and we had Anthea Muir, who's the president of Asia Pacific of Amplifon, which is, a chain of hearing aids clinics practices across Asia Pacific. And that's a multinational company. And she is someone who exemplifies curiosity in its most authentic and strong manner by just being able to be vulnerable.
Yeah. Vulnerability is crucial if you want to bond with people, if you want to build a culture of trust.
Yeah.
You have to show that you are also able to admit your faults and you can admit that you are wrong or you don't know. So how to help those leaders to understand that humbleness is crucial in terms of building this kind of culture?
Yeah. It's a hard one, isn't it? Because I think to be humble means letting go of your ego.
Right.
And ego is difficult because it's also part of your identity, right? And, what you learn through the years that got you to that point, whether it's like your title, your package, your status, you actually have to say that, well, that doesn't define me. What values do I hold as a person, as a human being that I want to impart to everyone around me? And that calls for like self-reflection. And I think for a leader to, want to be humble, to be vulnerable, and yet be incredibly strong in that space, right?
Right. Yeah.
You need that self-reflection and inner work.
And I think that a lot of those, let's say, old egoistic leaders, they are afraid to show vulnerability because they're afraid that they lose their status.
Correct.
But if they try it, at the end, they feel that it's not truth. They even build different but maybe stronger status, built on their values and built on their authentic self, rather than the egoistic self.
Yeah, especially if the egoistic self is a shield that you build over the years.
Shield, that's it, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, we have our jobs to do as well to remove the culture, the systems that reward that. I think oftentimes we look at like people who are driven, motivated, focused on results, and we call them high performers. I think there should be, a part in your annual performance review about how this person contributes to the culture as well. Not just about results, because this person could be detrimental to the culture that you're building.
Yeah, and there are some studies, if you take the best achievers, they are not always the best team players.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Sometimes they even can undermine the team spirit.
Yeah. And again, it takes courage. It takes courage for a leader to recognize that and call it out.
Well, now I'm interested in your life story because you had 20 years of experience in marketing, and then you decided to go in a very different path. You had the courage to follow your own dreams. So what was the moment that you decided to be entrepreneur by yourself?
That's a great question. I think I had the opportunity to stare that down last year. And, it was thinking about, do I want to continue on this corporate path for another 5-10 years? Or do I want to explore doing something different? And maybe it's, age or that time where, you kind of like stare down
maybe wisdom.
I like that perspective. Yes, thank you. And, you just kind of like evaluate, do you want to explore something different and fail and learn something? Of course, you want to succeed. But look, like if, you try something new, there's always the possibility of failure. And I felt like it was important to explore that because I see a lot of people around me who don't. And if, you explore that and you show people that it's a bit like role modeling, if you show people that it's okay to try and fail and then, do something else later, it's okay. It's okay to fail.
If you describe your emotions, what is different now than it was when you were in a corporate world?
I think the mental state actually was the biggest difference. I think emotions still feel the same, like you get your ups and downs and, you get your lows and highs. But I feel like there's so much more mental energy. Like you're not so drained that easily. I think, I think when you're in an environment that's high stress and surrounded by calls and meetings, you have to be very disciplined to create that space for yourself to recover that mental energy. And emotionally, I think, when you do have that mental space, then you become more aware of like actually how you're feeling and then how you can impact, the people around you.
Your podcast is called Rebel Curiosities. So you are basically doing interviews with rebels. So do you consider yourself as a rebel?
To me, curiosity is a sign of rebellion. And I'm definitely curious. So I wouldn't call myself a rebel in the sense that I want to challenge like every establishment out there and break all the rules. Although I do sometimes, like if you speak to my mother, please don't. She might give you a different story. But I think, being curious and the spirit of it, like just exploring alternatives, asking questions, like what could be better, what could be different? Why did this happen? Why do people do the things they do? I think that is a way of rethinking the status quo. And to me, that's kind of like a form of rebellion, being rebel.
In my experience, the problem starts with schools because schools don't encourage people to be rebels.
Yes.
Because if you are a rebel at school, you have problems. So
correct.
how to teach kids to be rebels, how to embrace this mindset with people around us. Like if we have, for example, families, how you can embrace this mindset with your kids.
It's almost like a systemic problem when we look at it, right? Because when we look at education, you're talking about institutions, you're talking about academic processes.
Yes.
And these things don't change overnight. And to change the system, sometimes you got to find the small things that tweak the different mindsets. And individual mindset can spark off like different things, which is why I find that, this whole conversation and exchange of ideas is so important. And why I started the podcast as well, because, ideas, conversations can drive dialogue and eventually change. For kids though, I mean, they are at a phase of that life where they're going to learn, whether being curious is going to be good or not. And in school, that knocks it out of you, right? If you're going to be the one who asks questions all the time, you're going to be standing outside the classroom.
Right, yeah.
And that's never going to be productive. And I think for teachers and for parents, it's finding the balance to which the child is testing boundaries and needs to learn, and encouraging that with, having developed their own thinking and opinions versus shutting down and say, that's too much. Get out.
Yeah, you can do the job as a parent, and then your kid is visiting a school that the teacher is not a rebel, and he's punishing the kid. So what you can do then? Like, for example, I experienced this during my studies, that I had very different teachers. Some were rebels too, some were amazing teachers. For example, my chemistry teacher, she was amazing. So she embraced us to test everything, and we did all those experiments in the classroom, even dangerous ones. And she was the best teacher that I had. But then I had teachers that truly don't care about us as kids, and they truly didn't care about our curiosity. They were just telling us what's the truth, and that was it. So what to do if you have that kind of teacher?
It almost feels like there's a parallel between, an organization and a school, isn't it? Because at the school, you do have a leader, and that's maybe the principal or maybe the management team. And then, you have the school board. And sometimes whether the teacher, the approach, the way they do, the way they are hired, could be part of contribution to that culture. But as a teacher, if I'm a teacher, I think it's important to be able to provide a space for the kid to explore different facets of knowledge. And I've grown up in that system where learning is memorizing everything. There is no question about what interests you, what are you curious about, and chemistry was fun for you, it wasn't for me, because my chemistry teacher was strict and it was all about memorizing all the formulas.
Yeah, I'm now thinking about the teacher, and she was truly one of the best leaders that I experienced in my whole life. So she was not just a chemistry teacher, she was very inspiring in terms of values. And still I'm in contact with her.
That's awesome.
After 30 years.
Yeah.
And she still remembers me, and sometimes we are chatting on social media. So she was one of the best teachers ever. And I think that, as you described, this is very similar to working environment. Like, you have bosses that you remember forever, that influence you in a positive way with their values. They were humble. They were able to make you a better person. But then you have those toxic bosses that they had like those truth with capital T, and they were egoistic. So what to do if you have a toxic boss? It's very difficult, right? So what you can do as an employee or as a manager, if you have like toxic boss, what you can do then?
This is a question I ask my guests and the people I speak with as well. I'm like, we talk about being curious leaders and they are better leaders. So what do you do with a leader who's non-curious? And what do you do with an organization that's not curious, doesn't allow you to experiment and fail?
Right. Yeah.
And very often times, these experts or, people with a lot of experience will tell me the same thing. Leave.
Leave, yeah.
I mean, you would want to stay and change. And again, it's important to be a change agent, but also consider the impact on yourself.
Right.
Like, to be able to do something well in the environment and drive change, there must be factors at place that enable you.
Yeah, that's the same experience with my clients too. Yeah, that's maybe the only moment that I advise them to leave, because if they tried a lot, if they give the feedback to the boss and nothing changed, and if they are drained, that's maybe the time to have the courage to try something new. And even though if they fail, at the end of the day, they will be much more happy.
Yeah, and like I think for leaders to want to be curious, curiosity is the root of a lot of other traits. So, for example, empathy. Someone who can empathize would need to care and be curious about the other person. And if a leader doesn't have that, it is very hard for, let's say, a fellow colleague or a member of the team to come and change that person. And again, unless like the culture align to provide an environment where curiosity can thrive, it can be pretty hard for someone who's very curious to thrive in a very non-curious environment.
Right, yeah. And of course, it's a spectrum, right? It's not black or white. So you have, on a one hand, you have that very toxic environment. And on the other hand, you have like the psychological safety and the place that you can express your feelings, emotions. You are not afraid to be judged. But most of us are somewhere in the middle. So what are those small steps that we can do to become better leaders on a daily basis? Because you cannot change that toxic boss for one day to another, but you can deploy some small changes. So what are your advices? Like, how can you build this positive mindset, and how to be a better leader every day?
I think empathy is a big piece of it. And empathy is not just about, being sympathetic to the other person, or, just trying to understand where that person is coming from. But I think empathy is a big part of seeing where that person is coming from, and then having the right response to it. So it's
again
about
curiosity.
Exactly. And you're curious about that moments where that person is triggered. So if your manager is toxic at certain times, understand that. And then maybe have different occasion where you would raise that up.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And because no one's perfect, and leaders have different nuances and traits. And I can see that different levels of curiosity come across in different things. So you can have someone who's really visionary, but don't really know how to get things done. And then you have vice versa as well.
Yeah.
So I think, being a curious leader in yourself, whether you're like a mid-management level or a junior executive, if you apply the concept of empathy and curiosity to people around you, just be curious about where they're coming from and how you would react to it, will have a lot of impact.
And then you need to ask good questions, right?
Yes, correct.
And be able to be silent, because my experience with those toxic leaders was that they were talking all the time.
Yes.
And they're like unable to shut up and to listen. In my experience, like, to build the skill of active listening is part of curiosity too, right?
Correct. And powerful questions is part of that. A lot of people think like, all right, there's 5 types of questions that are powerful, and I will keep asking that. No, it's about recognizing when you will use it, And this is why I also think coaching is important. Like, the art and the philosophy of coaching. I think any manager should learn how to coach, because coaching is not about what to say. It's about creating the space to listen.
I remember when I was 20 years old, and I had my small company of 5-6 people back then. And I read the book Coaching from John Whitmore. And it's truly changed my managing style, because since then I was not telling people what to do, but I was trying to ask questions. And it was a huge shift. I know I was 20 years old.
Yeah.
It helped me a lot. So I truly believe in coaching as the way of living, not just to... You can use coaching in a conversation with your friends, with your kids, with your parents too sometimes. It's the most difficult part.
It is.
To coach your parents. But sometimes you can ask questions.
You have to tell me more about that.
Yeah. Let's say that you want to be a better leader. You want to be a better person. But what to do when the boss or the leader doesn't want to improve? Because I met those people that they told me that they are already perfect.
It's such a I laugh because it's quite common actually, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And sometimes they may not say that they are perfect, but they're not willing to change.
Yes.
And that's the opposite of curiosity. That's the opposite of open-mindedness.
Yeah, it's a fixed mindset, right?
It's a fixed mindset.
They already know everything. They have answers for everything, and they don't need to teach new things.
Yes. And
a lot of new things.
It is that whole statement of, this is who I am, and there's just no way about that.
Yeah.
And the world has to accept that because this is who I am. And I find that hard to change. So, if you want to change someone like that, I would say probably not. Find your own tribe. And unless you are using coaching and you have a way of holding that space and help and guide that person to explore ways. But again, if that person is fixed, like, look, the world has to adapt to me, not me to the world, then it's a mindset.
Yeah, but sometimes, if you have fixed boss, you can leave. But sometimes you have people around you that you cannot leave. Like,
that's true.
Like your life partners, your friends. So how you can help those people to be more open-minded? It's maybe the most difficult question because I'm getting this question after almost all my keynotes. Like,
really?
Yeah. How to change others. And I'm interested in your answer.
I think a lot of, we talk about empathy and that comes down to emotional intelligence, really. And, if you want to change someone, first of all, recognize that it may not always be appreciated.
Of course, never.
Never. And, change has to come from a desire of want to change.
Right.
So I would say small steps. If let's say, you have a life partner who's a smoker and you want that person to stop smoking, right?
Yeah.
Let's just say the simplest thing. You got to help that person desire that. It's not about telling that person every day, 50 times a day, stop smoking.
Yeah.
That's never going to work.
Yeah. The more you push, the more resistant they become.
Yes. Yeah. And I would say help that person get curious about the benefits of not smoking, go for walks, have a good meal, like slowly reduce from 50 sticks to 48 sticks a day and slowly work from there. Like, help that person get curious about what could be if they stop smoking.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that could be one way of helping them increase that desire to change as opposed to contributing to that obstacle, that inertia to change. But if you keep telling me not to smoke, I think I'm going to smoke more because it's giving me stress.
Right, yeah. So the less you push, maybe the bigger is the chance that they will change.
Yeah, and I guess that's where, being curious comes in because you help that person to get curious about the possibility of the alternative. And I find that an easier way, like maybe to change someone's perspective and habit than to tell that person, this is not good for you.
Of course, yeah. Extrinsic motivation doesn't work in the long term. So you have to spark intrinsic one.
That's
and you have to spark curiosity, right? In the second part of my podcast, I always ask guests about their personal values and about purpose of their life. So can you describe me what are your life values and how you think about purpose in your life?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah. That's why the podcast is called Deep Talks.
It is. So, there was, I think I must have been in my 20s and I just sat down, with my journal and I decided to think like deeply, like of all the words that could describe life, like which 3 words would I want to pick out? So I after a long, reflection and writing, it eventually became these 3 words, which was authentic, curious, no surprise.
No surprise.
And fearlessness. And I find that all these 3 sometimes need to be together.
Yeah.
To have a genuine purpose, like, its purpose in life. Like curiosity in itself without the courage or the fearlessness to act on it. It's an exercise of thinking and dreaming, and if you have fearlessness without just, being curious or real in your approach, you're just kind of going out there and offending everyone, right?
That's so smart. Yeah, the combination of those 3 things. Yeah. It's essential because if you miss one, it doesn't work.
Yeah. And, I had it said to me before, like authenticity as a word seemed to be overused. It's become such a buzzword, in today's society.
But still, people are not authentic. So we need to use it even more.
I love that. And yeah, exactly. That's what it is. And sometimes being authentic is not about like, this is who I am. This is the real me. So I'm just going to be out there and offend everyone. That's okay. That's not the case, right?
You mean like if someone is authentic as well, right?
Yes.
I'm authentic.
Exactly. This is who I am. Which is why I think authenticity sometimes gets taken wrongly because, it's about being in touch with you as a human, and it's about how you are and your impact around people around you. So you cannot just go out there and offend everyone and say that you don't care. You have to care.
Well, but sometimes I think that those people that are unauthentic, as we described, they build a shield around them because they are afraid. How to help those people to put this shield down and to offer their real self to others? Because sometimes they had a negative experience because they opened themselves and someone hit them. So how to help them to do it again, to be more open?
As I reflect on myself, sometimes I tend to go the other way, right? Like if you feel too much about something, and then you realize, oh, you're hurt, you just tend to shut down. And then you completely detach yourself. Like that is that shield mechanism that you talk about. And I think, to try something, I think you got to take small steps as well. There's this example that someone said to me, which I love, like, go to a Starbucks. This is in a book. Go to a Starbucks, ask for a discount. Like, it sounds really silly, right? Because first of all, Starbucks as a national, multi-global chain is never going to give you a discount. And secondly, you are never going to go up to a Starbucks counter where everybody can hear you and say, can you give me a discount on that Frappuccino? But the whole point is not to get it. The whole point is to say it and know that it's okay to get a no.
Oh, wow.
It's okay to be said, no, sorry, we don't do that. It's like, oh, okay. That's okay. And I think it's that whole exercise of doing things, it's small steps, small examples, and learning that rejection is not a bad thing.
It's very interesting because we are afraid that someone says no to us. But on the other hand, we are afraid to say no to others.
Yes.
So this is a huge problem. I think that if you are unable to say no, that then you are overwhelmed by priorities of others.
And if you cannot say no, you cannot say yes to the right things.
Right, yeah. So we are afraid to be rejected, but we are afraid to reject others.
Yeah.
Wow. So how to have the courage to say no?
Build on that slowly.
Slowly.
Yeah. I think, from like being scared to courageous and fearlessness, I mean, that's a huge gap, right?
Yeah.
And I think what it is get yourself to a state where being told no, having faced like rejection in the smaller forms, ask for something and it doesn't happen, it's okay, I remember reading it somewhere as well, like, give yourself like 100 ways to get rejection. And, I think boys like to do that because they ask girls out all the time and they get used to it.
Never happened to me.
I'm sure. But get used to it. And I think what it does is it slowly builds up your confidence. I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
And then after a while, you realize that it doesn't hurt you. There's this exercise that, I seen it done in sales training before, where we would, you want to tell salespeople, because salespeople are the people who get
rejected all the time.
That's their job, right?
Yeah.
And then if you want to provide really good customer service and experience, you cannot be afraid of failure. So one of the exercises that, we do is kind of like go around and say, hey, like, that's a really nice pair of specs. Can I have it? And of course, the participant will say, no, like, I need to see with it. Oh, okay. And then you go to someone and say, hey, can I have your pair of shoes? And, and at the end of the day, it was like, it's okay. You get told no, and, nothing happened.
But again, you have to step outside of your comfort zone to try new things. And the more you try, the better you are in accepting the failure at the end.
Yeah, and that's a great example. Like, because being told no is easy when it's still within what you're comfortable with. But trying something that you're not used to, right? And then maybe being told like, oh, that was crap. Like, that's a terrible thing to do. But again, small steps. I think you get used to it. And then, I also hear that once you get to a level of success, that's when you start to get negative comments. So you should see it as a sign of success instead.
Yeah. But still, it's very difficult, because the more you get negative comments, for example, on social media, if it's like 10, 20, it's okay. But if it's 500,
I know,
you start to undermine yourself with those questions like, okay, maybe they are right because this is a huge scale.
Yeah.
So how to have the courage to be yourself? Because this is my question, because sometimes I know that if I'm truly myself, I get negative comments all the time, because if you are yourself and if you have a courage to say things that are unpopular, for example, or are not mainstream, then you get negative comments on social media. So how to have the courage to be truly yourself and accept that there are a lot of people that they disagree with you.
Yeah. I have so many thoughts on it, because disagreement is another topic that, we should cover as well. Yeah. I feel like the art of disagreement hasn't been quite established too. But negative comments, I mean, first of all, I think we have to establish whether that feedback is a constructive criticism or not. Because a lot of people, it's easy to jump on your laptop, your keyboard, and say, I think that sucked, and tell you a lot of reasons why it sucked, right?
And does it happen even in Asia, this? I think that it's only a matter of post-communist countries that everyone is writing very nasty comments.
No. It's definitely in Asia. It's definitely human behavior.
Okay.
And I think it's easy to criticize, especially if someone feels like that opinion that you're expressing runs counter to them. And which is why I come to disagreement. Because if someone doesn't agree with you, automatically that becomes someone who is not on your side. And it's very polarizing. It's a yes or no, it's a black or white. And often issues in life aren't, which is why being open-minded, being curious about what opinions could be, might just be the answer to that.
Yeah, I truly love when you said that the feedback is constructive or destructive. And sometimes we take the destructive feedback as something truly emotional, but you should ask okay, was there something that had any value to me? Was it something that I can be better person after I accept this feedback? And if not, it was not a feedback. It was an attack, for example.
Yeah. And, if you have feedback that whatever you're doing is beneficial, sometimes then look at that and shut down, the negative comments. And sometimes it's not that you want to be in an echo chamber where, everything you do is good. But you got to have that reflection and the space to think about whether that's benefiting you as well. I think the other flip side is think about whether what you're doing is benefiting people as well. If all you do is to get negative, comments and criticism, maybe relook at the audience. Maybe what you're saying is really not fit for, people where you might be hurting someone. But then again, if you're getting good comments, right, it's a balanced view about what you're serving.
But sometimes I feel that you can get 100 of positive comments and one negative one, and you are focused on the one negative one.
Yes.
Because it's much more powerful to you.
Correct. Especially if that negative one picks at a very fragile area that,
Exactly. And they know how to do that.
Yes.
They are masters in picking the right thing to attack.
Yes. And again, I think it comes down to having that curiosity and courage. Think about it and have that reflection space. That one comment is going to erase all other 100 great comments that you have.
Probably not, but
But
in terms of your emotions, it's difficult.
It is. And I think it's important to look at your emotions as well. Curiosity doesn't apply just to people around you, but I think it applies to yourself too.
Oh, right.
And I think it's important to use that as a moment where you self-reflect. Why did that matter so much to you?
Is there a term self-curiosity?
I think that might be. I think there's terms and papers, written on how do you apply that lens to yourself. And I feel like people need to be more compassionate and curious to themselves.
Of course, how you can understand others if you don't understand yourself.
Exactly.
Come on,
Exactly. And we spoke a little bit about coaching earlier. The best coaches are people who also go through a lot of, inner work and do a lot of self-reflection and do self-coaching.
Yeah. So my last group of questions is about purpose. So
Yes.
what is your definition of purpose in life?
Purpose is something that's meaningful to you personally. And I think a lot of people get lost along the way because they've been told what their purpose should be.
Okay, yeah.
And maybe their environments and their, the society at large don't reward them for thinking through what their purpose is.
Oh, great, yeah.
So I think purpose is meaningful to the individual. And purpose is that reflection that what you do in that space can have a positive impact either on yourself or to people around you.
Then what is your recent purpose? Why you do what you do?
And I love that you use the word recent because, a lot of people think like purpose must be that thing I live my entire life by.
No, it's
not.
It can change a lot. Yeah.
It can change. So thank you for saying that. I really like that. My recent purpose would be to explore how we can be better by being curious. Because, curiosity to me is the spirit of exploring possibilities, thinking about, what's limiting us and what the current status quo is and how we rethink it. So it's important in that space because I feel like we can uncover so much better versions of ourselves if we do that well.
Now I understand why we have such a great conversation whenever we meet, because I did a strength test and curiosity was my number one strength.
Really?
Yeah.
Was it the VIA strength?
It was VIA. Yeah.
Right,
or Strength Finder from Gallup.
Strength Finder, yes.
So
that's the reason why we
That's why we connect, yeah.
Yes.
So the last question is, what is your advice for our listeners, how they can build their curiosity on a daily basis, what they can do today or tomorrow to be more curious?
Yeah. I think curiosity is innate. Like, it's kind of like we have different levels of it, but that gets killed pretty quickly either by school or by work, It gets knocked out of you and you decide, all right, that's not worth the trouble. I think, again, start from small steps. Like, I remember being asked a question like, what's your passion in life? Like, when you're young and looking for a job, they'll be like, what's your passion in life? Find that and you never have to work a day in your life. And I could never answer that question. Never. But instead, I was kind of asking myself the other flip side and say, what am I curious about? What is it that I could learn, explore, talk to people about? And I think start from there. Like that would be an easier way to explore your curiosities.
Yeah, that's so smart because passion comes with a lot of time.
Yes.
And
a lot of energy and investment. And it's not something that everyone knows very quickly what they want.
Exactly. So follow your curiosity, not your passion, because passion you build in a long term with your curiosity.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, thank you so much, Pearl.
Thank you,
Peter.
It was
a great pleasure. And I hope that we record another podcast in the future.
We need to keep these conversations alive.
Thank you so much. And guys, thank you for listening and take care.